Now, the rise of revolutionary nationalists. So, we saw that one of the consequences that occurred because of the death of Lala Lajpat Rai was the claim of Purna Swaraj. Now, the other thing that happened was the rise of revolutionary nationalists. So, Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Sukhdev, and others formed the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association in 1928 in the Firoz Shah Kotla in Delhi. And they had different ideology in their mind. They had this thing that i- in order to gain the attention of the Britishers towards the unjust that they were doing, they had to resort towards the revolutionary ways. So obviously they assassinated Colonel Saunders, who were who was associated with the lathi charge that happened, because of which Lala Lajpat Rai died. So obviously they assassinated him, and after that Bhagat Singh and B.K. Dutt, they threw a bomb in the Legislative Assembly in 1929, because of which they were arrested and they were hanged. So Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru, the three of them, they were hanged because of their revolutionary activities and because of this incident. And Chandrasekhar Azad, he thought that I'd rather die with my own bullet rather than dying with the bullet that is a British person's. So they all died in their in very very young ages, and they had this very revolutionary way of thinking towards the independence. That is also very important, because we have seen all the non-violence techniques, but it is not important that it is not mandatory that all the people think alike. Some of the radicals, some of the revolutionary would always grow towards some height, and they would also give us a sense of nationalism. So what made this feeling of nationalism rise in Indians, was not just these non-violence things. It was also because the sacrifices made by these nationalists. They were barely 23, 24 years old. They were in their 20s or 30s, and they died for the cause of this thing. They died for the cause of freedom. They died for the cause of our nation. So obviously that also gave kick to all the masses that were there in the Indian subcontinent. So the nation of India. So basically, this is also important, along with all the movements that were supported with the non-violence techniques. These were also important, because it also gave kick to the Indian people that, okay, if these people, they're dying for our cause, why not we also do something for our nation's cause? So that is also important. The Dandi March. Now, this is a very important. Of course, I've been saying that all these events are very important, because all these events led us to something which we know as our freedom. So that is why I've been saying that all these events are very important. You must learn about them in very very short. Like you should know the basics about them. The Salt March, also known as the Dandi March, in 1930 marked the start of civil disobedience to break the Salt Law. The route was over 240 miles long from Sabarmati to Dandi. So basically, this Salt Law, the British had monopoly to create salt, to have the manufacture of salt, and they also used to have had taxes on these salt. So Gandhiji and a lot of people were very very agitated with this, because they thought that salt was a very basic necessity of all the Indians, and this tax thing infuriated them, that there should be no tax on salt, and we should also be allowed to to make salt. So they went on to Dandi March, which was 240 miles long from Sabarmati to Dandi. Dandi was the sea coast. They went there and they made salt. This was a kind of civil disobedience. Civil disobedience is when uh, disobey your authorities' decisions, your authorities' impositions and laws and policies. So basically, they disobeyed the laws that were there for the salt, and that is why it is called civil disobedience. All the people, they disobeyed the laws that were there about salt. Women in the freedom struggle. Now, in the last chapter, we had seen that how the women's movement was, gaining a very, very height, gaining a height during the rise of the nationalism phase. So, women in the freedom struggle is a very important topic. Sarojini Naidu had to persuade Gandhiji to allow women to join the salt satyagraha. Ambabai from Karnataka picketed cloth and liquor shops in Udupi. So Gandhiji initially was not in the favor of having women in the march, having women in the having women as a part of national struggle. But ultimately, he and all the people, the rest of the people, they realized that women, they form half the population of the country, and if we confine them to the household, it would not be benefit. It would not cause a benefit for us in the freedom struggle. Rather, if we promote them to come out of the houses and be a part of the freedom struggle, the voice would be greater, of course. So basically, our voice would be doubled due to their participation only. And of course, they would also have a chance to be a part of something great, be a part of something which would be fulfilling to them as well. They have always been confined to the house, and this would give them a meaning in their life to do something purposeful, worthful for their country. So of course, Sarojini Naidu then she persuaded Gandhiji for this. But after that, these leaders, they gain consciousness, they gain this thing that okay, we should have women. And women also, they were very, very awakened during that time. They came up with their own resolutions, their own solutions. Sarojini Naidu was also the president of the Indian National Congress at some point of time. This Ambabai from Karnataka, she was married at age 12, and she was also widowed at a very early age. But then she found something to go on in her life. She picketed clothes and liquor shops. She led mass movement. She led people to form some sorts of agitation against the Britishers. So that is very important part towards the women's movement as well. Now, a beam of joy happened when the Government of India Act 1935 was passed. So the Government of India Act of 1935 prescribed provincial autonomy, and the government announced election to the provincial legislatures in 1937. Provincial autonomy, of course, means that in those provinces you will have your autonomy to make laws and policies according to your thing, and you will be elected there. So Government of India Act 1935, it prescribed provincial autonomy to the, of course, it was after a great struggle. If you have been given something which is giving you a little autonomy, of course not everything that you wanted, but of course it could be seen as the first step towards the freedom struggle, towards the independence. So obviously they perceived it in a very positive way, and Congress formed government in 7 out of 11 provinces. That showed that okay, India was ready to accept the Indian administration. India was ready to gain independence in all sorts of way. So that happened in Government of India Act. Now let's see Quit India movement and later. Quit India. The movement was launched at the Bombay session of All India Congress Committee by Mahatma Gandhi in 1942. So during this time, World War II was happening, and Mahatma Gandhi, when he saw that World War II was happening, and before he was he was not very supportive of Hitler's regime, so he supported Britishers. But then after some time, he also thought that okay, our country should also gain independence. Like, this is the right time, this is the perfect time to create a pressure against the British government to leave our country and have us rule ourselves, have the law rule ourselves. So he created this Quit India movement. He launched the Quit India movement at the Bombay session in 1942 when the war was at peak, and he sought with this that okay, we are going to attain our freedom and you are going to give it to us, because with the war you're not only involving us but you're not even giving us a say. So basically, when the war happened, Gandhiji very, very in a peaceful way, he demanded that we should be given our freedom while you go to the war. But the Britishers, they refused. So after that, he was made to launch this Quit India movement, because it was important that the Britishers realized that this was the high time that we are granted independence, and now your colonization has to get over. So that happened in 1942. The demand for partition. Now we call this as a black event of our history, but we should remember that every event had a silver lining in itself. So in 1940, the Muslim League moved a resolution demanding independent states for Muslims. We can trace the partition of Bengal. We can trace this to the partition of Bengal. So when partition of Bengal happened and the Muslim, they supported it, the Muslim League, when they supported it, in some or the other way, all the Indians, they had this thing that okay, now Hindu and Muslim are acting as two separate entity, and if we have to fight, we have to fight together. in a united way. But nobody thought at that time that what if our the purpose for which we are uniting is one day fulfilled, and after that what would happen to us? Either we'll be living in unity, or we'll be leaving in unity. So that living and leaving, the thing of living and leaving created a kind of clouded opinions of every Indian. So there was this thing that whether partition should happen or not. But eventually, the Muslim League, they moved for a resolution demanding independent states for Muslim, that Muslim, they should be governing their own independent states. They would not be governing by the Hindu states, because they always had this fear that India was in majority it had Hindu people. So basically, if India was governed by a Hindu prime minister, or India was governed by whoever is Hindu at the chair, the Muslim opinions, the voices of the Muslim, the cultural heritage of the Muslim, they would not be supported. They would not be heard. So they had this insecurity, which grew and which eventually caused them to demand for independent states for Muslim. Now, the cabinet mission happened, which in March 1946, the British cabinet sent a 3-member mission to Delhi to examine the demand for Pakistan. So, very less people were in favor of Pakistan. The cabinet mission, who sent 3-member mission to Delhi to examine that whether creation of demand of Pakistan was valid. They also gave a negative opinion that no, a separate province should not be created. But obviously, it was not taken well by the both the INC and the Muslim League, because they proposed that they proposed one or the other things. They proposed several lists, a list of things that were not agreed by both the Muslim League as well as the Indian National Congress. So there, obviously, the cabinet mission, it failed very, very badly. Direct action day. After the failure of the cabinet mission, the Muslim League announced 16 August 1946 as the direct action day, calling for a mass agitation to win its demand for Pakistan. Now, they were getting really serious about their demand for Pakistan, and they wanted to show people that, okay, this is going to happen, whether you do it our way or whether you do it your way, but this is going to happen. Creation of Pakistan is going to happen. They agitated against the cabinet mission, and they also called for a direct action day. Hundreds of people were killed in that, and obviously now all the people, they were realizing that, okay, this demand, there must there must be some resolution to this, because if this is not going to happen, then there would be more deaths. After this partition thing was demanded, a lot of tragedies occurred between these two religions, Hindu and Muslim. So basically, all the people, they had this consciousness in them that, okay, we have to do something about this. Something about this should have been done, because it would, if not, then it would create a loss of lives in a very, very huge manner. That ends our chapter. Of course, after the direct action day, partition of Pakistan, of course, partition of a country did happen, and East and West Pakistan was created separately from our country, India, and their Independence Day happens on 14th of August, a day before our Independence Day, and that day we finally gained independence. So yay! So let's move on to the questions. Question 1. Why were people dissatisfied with the British rule in the 1870s and 1880s? Of course, there were a number of reasons. All the things that had been happening since the advent of the British rule, that they conquered the territories, they had their imports, they forced their British goods on the people, all the handicrafts and all the industries and all the business of the Indian people were gone. They were gone out of employment. They were unemployed. A large scale of people were unemployed. They were forced to learn the English language. And some of the missionaries, they also tried to forcibly convert people to Christianity. So all of things. Apart from that, what we read in this chapter was also that Arms Act was passed, of course, and then there was no freedom of speech. The freedom of speech was also curtailed by the press, the Vernacular Press Act. So a lot of reasons, all these reasons. Then there was the Forest Act, where the reserve forest people were not allowed to go to the reserve forest. A lot of the policies, a lot of the laws that were being passed by the Britishers in the 1870s and 1880s created a dissent among the Indian people, and obviously the people were very, very dissatisfied with the British rule during this period of time. Question 2. Who did the Indian National Congress wish to speak for? The Indian National Congress wished to speak for all the Indians. We should remember that it came from the people who were of the elite group, but it spoke for all the Indians. It spoke for all the Indians who had this thing that they wanted freedom from the British rule. So it spoke for the poor, as well as for the literate, as well as for the educated, as well as for the rich. It spoke for all the people, basically. Question 3. What economic impact did the First World War have on India? So for traders, for the businessmen, it had a very profitable impact. Like their sales went up. The craftsperson, the industry, it was all on boon, because the Britishers, they had to consume all their goods on themselves, and they needed help from India as well. So basically, all these businessmen, they gained a huge profit. But socially, and with the nationalism perspective, the First World War also had a very different kind of impact on India. The Britishers forced the rural people to have them admitted in the British Army in order to fight with them in the First World War. So that also happened. Economic impact was obviously a very, very positive one, a very booming impact on the Indian traders and craftsmen, industrialists. It all had a very booming impact. Question 4 is, what did the Muslim League resolution of 1940 ask for? It asked for the partition of country into India and Pakistan. It asked for a separate country for Muslims. So basically, it asked for partition that happened. Question 5 is, who were the moderates? How did they propose to struggle against the British rule? The moderates were the people who initially are accredited with the establishment of the Indian National Congress in 1885. They proposed to struggle against the British rule in a very moderate, in a very pacified way, where they proposed something in a very formal manner, in a very they presented something to the Britishers in a very formal manner. They presented in some sort of bill, or some sort of can be a proposal to the Britishers, and they asked that you should comply to our demands. So they thought that if the demand was just, the Britishers would comply to that. If it was unjust, they wouldn't. So their ways were very, very that is why they are called moderates. Their ways were very towards pacifist. Their ways were very calm, and they had a very reassuring belief on the Britishers, that the Britishers, they thought that they value our freedom, and they value our opinion. So they would understand, and if the demand is just, they would fulfill. So that is how they proposed to struggle against the British rule, in a very non-violent and a very pacified way. Question 6 is, how was the politics of the radicals within the Congress different from that of moderates? So the radicals, they completely differed from the moderates. They thought that this policy of praying was not working for India, and rather a revolutionary approach was needed, where the Britishers, they had to give attention to our demands. So rather than every time proposing them with a demand that, okay, you should do this to us in a very praying manner, that please, we need this. These radicals, they thought that a revolutionary way was was more important, like boycotting stuff, like strikes and agitations. So these radicals, they were very pro revolutionary ideas, like going on boycotts, and the boycotts or the strikes, they were the moderates, they were very much against the idea of strikes and boycotting everything, because they thought that it was not a peaceful way. It was not a way it was not a very formal way, and an educated person should not resort to such ways. So that is why they did not agree with the radicals, and there was this faction within the Congress, where one group was the radical group and the other group was that of the moderates group. Of course, they came together back in 1915. Now, question 7 is, discuss the various forms that the non-cooperation movement took in different parts of India. How did the people understand Gandhiji? The various forms that the non-cooperation movement took in different parts of the India was, in one part of the India, like we have seen, firstly, it happened with the Khilafat movement, where the people, they gathered in a very peaceful manner to show their demonstration against the British regime to show their, dissent towards the British Raj and what happened in the Turkey. So basically, Khilafat movement along with the non-cooperation movement was initially what was happened. And in different parts of the India, like in South India, it was led by several other people. Like for some of the regions, it was led by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Then Siraj Gopalachari, it was also led by him. And then many of the barristers that were there, such as Motilal Nehru or Asif Ali, Siraj Gopalachari, they gave up their practices supporting this non-cooperation movement, and they led these movements from their parts, from where they lived. So basically, the movement was, gaining momentum throughout the parts of India. People were boycotting the British goods. People were gaining momentum for the Swadeshi goods. So that is how it happened. And how did the people understand Gandhiji? They understood him as, a Masiha who was there to, resolve their problems. So he was, thought as a Mahatma that was there to, that had a solution to each of the people's problem that the Britishers feared. So they had this image of Gandhiji that Britishers were, fearful of Gandhiji, and that is why they they did many works in the name of Gandhiji, because they had this thing in mind that first he had the solution to all the problems, and secondly that Britishers were fearful of him. So obviously that was he. Some of the people also saw him as a god. Like we saw the representation of him as, similar to Lord Krishna. So obviously there was this point of view as well. Let's move on to the next question. Question 8 is, why did Gandhiji choose to break the salt law? So Gandhiji chose to break the salt law because, salt was a very basic necessity that was required by each and every person alive. And Britishers, they had this, very, very monopolized, the Britishers, they had monopolized the making of salt to the British industry. And obviously they taxed this salt to a very great extent. So that is why Gandhiji thought that salt was a very common necessity for everyone and it should not have tax, and people, they should be allowed to, make salt by themselves also. Like Indian industries, Indian people should also have a right to do that. So that is why he chose to break the salt law in the face of civil disobedience movement in Dandi March. Question 9 is, discuss those developments of 1937 to 47 period that led to the creation of Pakistan. So basically, in 1930, during this period, first of all, many people, trace this back to the partition of Bengal, where the, faction among Hindu and Muslim is attributed to that incident in the very beginning stage. After that, in 1937 also, when this provincial autonomy was happening, the British, they demanded, the Muslim, they demanded a separate electorate. Separate electorate was given to them. And after that separate electorate, things, went very, I think they began to think very clearly that, okay, we need a separate nation for the Muslims, because we think that as a minority, our voices will not be heard in this Hindu nation if it is created as a Hindu nation. So that is why they could not, place their trust in, the independence of India and no independence for them, because they thought that Muslim would be a minority and their voices will not be heard. So before the separate electoral rolls and after the creation of provincial autonomy also, they had their, they started strengthening their demand of, separate Muslim nation. So after that, in 1940, they also demanded separation of, partition of India into two states, into a Muslim state and a separate state for Muslims and Hindus. So and finally, we have independence of Pakistan on 14th of August 1947.